Thank you so much, Elena, for accepting the offer. I really, really appreciate that. I think this is an amazing opportunity, not only for myself, but also all my followers. I already told you last time, I have a lot of followers from academic perspective doing bachelor's or master's or PhDs or even postdocs, and they are trying to move from academia to industry.
Yeah.
And I always get a lot of comments like, how do we do this? How we find jobs? You know, especially if you are all the time working in academia, it's quite challenging to move from academia to industry. And I really, really appreciate that you accepted the offer and you joined this live. And I think that this will not only be so useful for me, but also for everybody else. Yeah, I just give the stage to you. So please introduce yourself and tell us about Elmed.
Elemed, yeah, exactly. So I'm CEO and founder of Elemed. We're Europe's leading medtech recruitment company. We specialize predominantly in recruiting in kind of the technical areas like R&D, clinical, regulatory, quality. Yeah, the company's 5 years old. In May, we just celebrated our 5th birthday. So it's a really exciting time for us, and I'm really excited to have the chance to discuss with you today and to give you and your followers some insights on what we typically see, and some tips on what people can be doing to really, you know, maximize their chances of making that move.
Thank you so much. So what comes to your mind when we talk about transition from academia to industry? What is the first thought in your mind?
It's a hard one, right? It's a hard transition. Typically, you know, what I understand is that obviously young people decide to pursue a career in kind of science, you know, wanting to contribute to groundbreaking technologies and through research, right? And so most people will take the career route of, you know, doing their undergrad, maybe their masters, then their PhDs, but then the step after that is highly competitive, and a lot of the time it really relies on government funding in a lot of circumstances, and it is quite a challenge to then get that. Or even for personal reasons, people kind of decide, maybe research isn't quite my thing, now I want to see something different. And then it's kind of like, okay, now let's move into industry and try to bridge that gap. So it is definitely a challenge, but if you are kind of planning it a little bit better, I think it will definitely give you an edge as a candidate when it comes to making that move. So you know, moving into industry is great because it offers a lot of stability, security, typically, you know, higher paid salaries, great career progression, and also a chance to kind of use the technical and research skills in a new context, but continue to build on your expertise. So that's kind of my initial thought.
Okay. I think a lot of stuff you already covered. So what do you, I mean, you talked about the students making this career move. What do you think the students need to consider when they're planning their?
So I think it's important to, I mean, unless you're completely set that forever you're going to stay in academia, I think you should always plan to build up a portfolio of experience even whilst you're in academia in order to transition that to industry. They're two very, very different worlds. So when you're kind of in academia, you know, it's all about knowledge and your studies and what you learn and how much you develop there and the grades that you're getting in those studies, and it's all about expertise, right? But actually when you go into industry, it is what you know and what you study, but the most important thing is experience.
Yeah.
And so very often we have this tricky situation that candidates are finding themselves in when they're saying, okay, I've just done all these great studies and now I want to go into industry, but then there's no experience, you know, to actually bring to the table. And so then we have this whole conversation, how do I get the experience if nobody will give me a chance? So I think it's really about, you know, from the beginning trying to sandwich into your studies an opportunity to be developing some experience there, so that if you do ever make the move into industry, or you find yourself wanting to move into industry, even if it's 6 months, you have something already to be bringing to the table.
Okay, so you mean like don't burn the bridges behind you, so don't only focus on academia, try to integrate some industry experience in your...
Yeah, Absolutely. Like, for example, so while you're studying, if there's an opportunity to have, you know, a year in between that gives you a chance to actually go and do a placement year in a company, or for example, to get 3 months of experience, you know, as part of your studies, but actually immerse yourself into a company as part of your studies. When you come out of that, you will already have inbuilt into your CV actual practical experience that you'd be able to bring to the table. So my advice is, when you're initially planning it, try to incorporate chances and opportunities to actually get a bit of hands-on experience. It doesn't matter if it's not kind of, you know, a specific type of role, right? So like, it doesn't matter if in the future you decide you want to apply for a role in regulatory affairs, but your working experience, you know, your internship or whatever has been in kind of R&D. It's the fact of having been inside of a company that kind of gives you that start that a lot of people look for.
Okay, I understand. I think that's a really great point. So what do you know, the application has a lot of compartments. So could you take us to different parts of a great successful application?
Yeah. So I think with applications, I think the best advice that I can really give for everybody is always, you know, like, basically apply for the right kind of roles, right? So I think kind of right now we're in a world where there's so much information coming at us all the time, and people have this kind of at least from what I've seen, you know, I might get people with 0 experience applying to a vice president role that I'm recruiting for that requires, you know, 20 plus years of experience. And so it gives an impression that people are really going out and just kind of like what we say in recruitment, spraying and praying. So I think the first thing is to actually make sure that you're applying for the right kind of role if you are actually making that move. And instead of, you know, saying, hey, you know, I'm going to go straight and work in R&D, and so therefore I'm going to apply for as many roles that I can in R&D, even if there is clearly requiring previous experience. I would say, instead of going very vertical in one type of role function and applying for all different roles that are maybe, you know, where you don't have enough experience, try to branch out more widely. So don't only apply for roles in R&D, but maybe apply for roles in clinical or in medical writing or regulatory or quality or production or any of these areas, but always within that entry level. Because when you're working kind of when you're applying for roles at that entry level, companies have basically said, okay, we're willing to take somebody and train them. And actually the skills that you would learn in academia, you would be able to apply them in not only just in R&D when you go into a company, but you could equally apply them in any of these other areas, and it would still be very relevant and valid experience. So I would say try to think horizontally instead of vertically in terms of the types of roles that you're applying for. So that's the first thing, apply for the right roles. And you can, when you go onto LinkedIn and you do a job search, there's a kind of a category where you can search by seniority, and there just put entry level, and that will bring up all the entry level positions where companies are willing to take people that maybe have just finished their studies or don't have, you know, a lot of experience to bring to the table, which will increase your chance of actually, you know, making it to interview. I would say it's also really important that, you know, you have then behind a really solid application, you know, like a CV, for example.
Okay, so what makes a CV stand out? What your CV shine?
Yeah. I think I mean, you know, we live in a world right now where, like, the words that I will keep going on about is targeted. You know, target the roles that you're going to apply for, target your CV for the role that you're going to apply for, target your cover letter is really important, because we're in the world now where everybody cares about kind of specialism. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So if you've got like it's great to have a generic CV, but you need to be adapting your CV for each role that you're applying for, right? And so if we take the idea of, okay, you know, you might apply for roles in R&D, you might apply for roles in regulatory or quality, have an R&D CV, have a regulatory CV, have a quality CV, right? So they're generic but specific for each of the role types, because there's nothing worse, and I see this a lot. People will send me their CVs for a role, you know, call it a regulatory affairs role that I'm recruiting for, and you know, it will have a big thing at the top and it will say, objective, I'm looking for a challenging role in R&D, you know? And so, like, I open that and I'm telling the truth, I won't even read past that top 1/3 of the CV, because straight away that tells me that this person is just spraying and praying, hasn't really looked at the job description, doesn't really know what they're applying for, and straight away, you know, basically you're out. So I think it's really important that you're making it, you're kind of matching, you know, what your CV says to what the role is. So making it really targeted is critical. And also not making it too long, right? So I think kind of like 1 to 2 pages is a good length for somebody. Plus, you know, if you've got a lot of publications that you want to list, either put that on the back page, or have it as a separate kind of attachment. But we don't want pages and pages and pages of CV.
Yeah, so maximum 2 page, and if you have 1 publication page, you can have like 3rd page attached to it somehow.
Exactly.
So you also recommend people including their publications also in their CV?
So yeah, I think it doesn't hurt to include your publications in your CV, but don't put it kind of, you know, in the what we call the real estate, right? So the best page is that first half of your top page, and that's really kind of, you know, the real estate of your CV. So what you want to make sure is on that top half of your first page that you have all the key things that you want that person to know. Don't expect that person to be scrolling to the bottom of the 2nd page to realize you're a good candidate for the role. Most specialized recruiters make a decision. I'll make a decision on a CV in about 3 seconds, genuinely, because that's all I do, right? Like I'm always reviewing applications. So I have a very clear, I know exactly what I'm looking for. And I already know by the first page, like if we're going to proceed with the candidate. So don't wait until the 2nd page to put all the great stuff about your achievements and the valuable experience that you bring, or the valuable skills that you're able to transfer. That needs to make sure it's kind of like halfway up on the first page, so that's the first thing that people see, you know, when they're opening it.
I mean, that's very interesting, because most of the time when you look at the CVs, I have a lot in the CVs from academia, and they bring the skills at the bottom of the 2nd page. So by this description from you, nobody even reads that. You know, it's just over. So you just put it in the top. So you would recommend putting it exactly after education, or how would you?
Yeah, so I would literally have kind of like name, right, and then a box with some key skills and knowledge, right? So you know, like, and I'm not talking about stuff like great communicator and motivated, because literally everybody says that, so it doesn't actually make you stand out in any way. But actually, you know, for example, you know, 3 years of research on this type of product, or, you know, detailed experience, you know, detailed expertise, you know, in orthopedics, or, you know, ability to do literature reviews, you know, written X amount of articles, or published X amount of, you know, put that in kind of like the top section, you know, with just like almost like boom, 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 you know, like 6 kind of key areas. And then you would have education, and then kind of, you know, some more details about, if you have no experience, what you've studied, and kind of what you've achieved whilst you've been studying.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great point. So people can really see what you have done in a more nice context, and if they are interested, they can go through the rest of your screen instead of waiting for them to go down in the 2nd. Okay. And what about, you know, in Europe, when I came to Europe, I notice is this picture in CV, because in US or in Iran, or I know, as far as I know, in a lot of other countries, people don't put CV picture in the CV, and kind of look at it more, how do you say, as a negative perspective. But how is it in Europe? What kind of picture you recommend people putting in CV?
So it's an interesting one, right? So like it really depends how you're applying. So if you're applying direct to a company, you can put a picture in. My point is always like, how much space is that picture taking of the real estate? That picture is not demonstrating valuable experience, right? So if you're taking up a 1/3 of the top part of your CV just to put a picture there, you know, if you had, you know, some critical skills or some critical bullet points, that's going to give you a better chance. If you're working with an agency, like a recruitment company like us, for example, we really believe in removing as much bias as possible from any of the companies we work with. So we will always delete the photos from CVs when we're presenting a candidate. So I think it is customary to do it in Europe, but you know, then the next question is that CV representative? So I've seen some pictures where, you know, I think more because when we're recruiting senior people, you know, like people will have had, you know, 20 plus years of experience, but their photo doesn't actually match up with kind of, you know, and then you realize that photo is probably 15 years old and it's still on their CV. Or equally, the other thing as well is, you know, if you're putting a photo on your CV, make sure it's the same photo that's on your LinkedIn. And now if I Google, if I literally go to images on Google and type in your name, what photos am I seeing of you, right? Like, so I think if you want to use a photo, you can, but I'm very much of the belief that experience and key bullet points add much more value than a photo.
Okay. So that's actually decreased quite a lot of burden, because I know some people that they're like, oh my God, this year I want to change my job, so I have to get a nice picture, and you have to pay €150 just to get a nice picture. No, because they feel they want to update picture, but at the end it's necessary for what you want to do based on what you say.
Yeah, totally. I think, look, for a CV, I wouldn't put a photo. I would put it on your LinkedIn profile, and that's where you can start. You can use a little bit more images. And by the way, like, nobody should be going, sorry if anybody on here is a photographer for people searching for their next career move, but nobody should be paying, you know, €150 for a photo. The portrait filter on your iPhone or, you know, equivalent Samsung or whatever other device, like, that is perfectly fine. You can take a perfectly good photo. I mean, my headshot on my LinkedIn, if anyone wants to check it out, that's just an iPhone shot on portrait mode. So
good enough.
Good enough. No, absolutely. We've got great technology out there now, you know, and you know, in the past people were spending a lot of money doing this type of thing, but now you really don't. And I think, you know, a good quality CV is better than, you know, paying €150 for a photo, for sure.
Yeah, in Germany, it's kind of funny. I don't know how you are familiar with German CVs, that you see people, especially if they go to a certain photographer, the poses of the people is the same. So
yeah,
because, oh my God, I've been in this photographer just because of the pose. It's really related to the picture like that. So what would you see as a red flag in a CV?
Okay, red flag for me, I would say stuff that doesn't add up, right? So like, if there's dates that don't match up, so if somebody's been studying and then did something else, and then but when I'm looking at the dates, there's gaps and it's not clearly explained. Even if it's like went traveling and took a gap year, like, if that's not there, that for me is a bit of a red flag. And the other thing that for me is a red flag is when people don't put the months around when they did stuff. If it's just the year, because then I'm kind of like, okay, but was that a whole year? Was that 6 months? Was that 2 months? Like, was that like December to January and it looks like they've done a whole year? Like, it's not clear. So I would say just the small things, you know, really are important. Basic stuff like grammar, you know, spelling and grammar mistakes really do jump out. So for me, you know, that is always a red flag, because that's kind of like, okay, how much time is somebody, you know, this is your brand, right? So if you're happy to put out something like that has spelling mistakes, you know, then that's always a bit of a red flag in terms of, okay, what's the quality of your work going to be like when you go into a role? I would say the other thing that for me is a total red flag, I have to say this, is when I get like a generic application, an email application with a CV attached, and it's like, dear sir, you know, and I tell you, like, if I get that, I just delete. I don't even open the CV. I would just immediately delete that email.
Okay. Yeah, it's the same. I think kind of funny. When I was in university, I would receive an email also, and then it's like they don't even write even wrong name. At least for you, they write their sir or whatever. For me, they would like copy paste email with this name of another professor.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah.
Not gonna work like that. Okay. So
Yeah.
if somebody goes to maternity leave, for example, would you writing this in the CV that I went on a maternity? Okay.
Yeah, just put maternity leave. That's fine. That's fine, and like that's not a bad thing. I mean, but the thing is, otherwise, like, there's a question mark there, right? There's like, okay, what's this gap that's unexplained? And now for me to find that out, I have to call and ask the question. Like, it's just easier if that's, like, I would say, clearly explained. And the other thing that I would say kind of for me is a red flag is just too much fluff, right? So like, just loads of descriptive words that don't really mean anything, like dynamic, energetic, communicator. You know, everybody says that, and I just feel that these words now, they just don't really have any meaning to them anymore. So I'm always saying to people, you know, think about what value you bring, like what makes you different, truly different, and what value do you bring to a company, and that's what you should be writing down on your CV. In particular, what is your area of expertise? Like what do you know better than anyone else, and is that clearly visible in your CV? I would always say cut out anything that is subjective.
Okay.
So anything that can't be proven, don't put it on your CV. So anything around popular, motivated, you know, like if you might be motivated, but my impression of you might not be that you're motivated, right? That's subjective. But you know, 5 years in academia is a fact, yeah, can't be debated. So you know, so go through your CV and just say, okay, what is actually a fact and what is an opinion? Cut the opinions and focus on the facts.
Okay, yeah, like, I mean, for example, for a PhD student, you can write, I was a great organizer, because you kind of know, organize what you do, but don't just write big words that's nobody really understands. How can relate to what exactly you do. So I saw a question came up, and it was also for me, I forgot to write it down, but I think it's quite interesting. I saw some people put their signature on the CV. What is the deal with that? Is it customary, or you don't recommend? What?
It doesn't really matter. I mean, it doesn't really detract or add anything, you know, really. I mean, it's more, that's a customary thing. We see it a lot in Germany, for example, which is kind of like, I updated my CV on this date, and then they sign it to show also that it's relevant and that they did it. But you know, I think it doesn't really, if you've got the space for it, but let's not now reformat your whole CV and add a whole other page just so you can sign it. You see what I mean?
Yeah, I know, I get it. If you have a space, you just write something, but if you don't have the space, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, exactly.
So, you know, it's like one of the big compartments of, I think, application is a cover letter. So what do you put in the cover letter? What elements one needs to include to make right cover, attracts attention, makes you shine, and make it look different? Okay.
So this is a really interesting one, and I'm not going to be too controversial here about cover letters, but I am going to say, I'm going to have a video coming out specifically on cover letters probably next week on my LinkedIn. Okay. And out of interest, I posted a poll to my network, and I have about 20,000 people in my network, right? So I kind of put out a poll that said, hiring managers and recruiters, I'm interested to know, what do you do first when you receive an application? 1, open the CV. 2, open the cover letter. Or 3, look at LinkedIn. And the last time I checked, it was about 70% open the CV first.
Okay.
Yeah. And then 20% would go to LinkedIn first before opening the CV or the cover letter, and 10% would open the cover letter. And 100%, that's what I would do. So I would always open a CV first, then I would look at LinkedIn, then I might open the cover letter. And I want to make that clear for your followers, because I'm not sure if everybody even realizes it, but if your argument is not made in your CV, and then your cover letter probably won't get read. So does that make sense? So typically for me, my decision making process will be, I'll open the CV, I'll have a look at the CV. Then if I will make a decision based on the candidate's CV, right? If I think this person will proceed. If the CV looks great, but I want to know a little bit more, then I'll check out their LinkedIn, then I'll check out the cover letter and have a little read of the cover letter. But it's not the other way around. So typically, most people, according to my audience, you know, only 10% first open the cover letter and then look at the CV. So it's really important that whatever arguments you want to make are in your CV first. Don't put something in your cover letter that is not in your CV, because then you risk the chance that they might never know, because it's only in one of those. So that's the first thing. And then with regards to the cover letter, you know, if you want to include a cover letter, they're useful when used in conjunction with a really strong CV. The cover letter should not be generic, right? So this is where you go that extra step and you talk about why this company, why this role, and why you. And really your cover letter should cover these 3 things. It doesn't need to be long. It could be like 2 paragraphs, you know. Nobody wants to sit there and read like 3 pages of cover letter anyway.
Okay.
But really, this is your chance to show, okay, I'm consciously applying to this company. I'm consciously applying for this role. And this is why I think I'd be a good fit. So why this company, why this role, and why you? And then the next part to that is to talk about the value that you bring and not what you want to get from it, right? So a mistake that a lot of candidates make, I do a lot of interview coaching with also senior candidates, right? And this is something that I see everybody, it's a trend. It's not just, you know, junior people, senior people make the same mistakes, but they go to interviews or they make applications based on what they want to get from the company and not what they can offer. So then the whole conversation is around, this is what I want you to be doing for me. This is what I want to be taking. I want to be doing something that I have no experience in. I want to get training. I want to get development. You know, I want to get a better salary than what I'm currently getting. I want to be given all this great opportunity and be relocated and work in this other country. And, you know, it sounds very much like that, but there's nobody talking about, okay, but this is the stuff that I can bring. You know, I've got this, you're an orthopedic company and I'm a specialist. You know, I've done 5 years in academia and I know loads about orthopedics, right? So I feel like I'd be able to bring, you know, cutting edge knowledge of, you know, the most important trends and research that's happening in the industry right now. Yeah, it's a very different kind of proposition. So in the cover letter, it needs to be directed towards what are you adding, what are you bringing, not what do you want to get. Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes sense. I mean, you should write that before writing, I want to get a good salary and maybe a automobile from my company or whatever. You write what you can offer so you can attract them, you know, just to read your basically application or something.
Yeah.
But actually, I'm surprised that even senior people make mistake.
Yeah. I think because, you know, this is it's human nature, right? Like, and I think when companies ask in interview, particularly, why are you applying for this role? People focus too much on the why, and they're not really understanding the reason that this question is being asked. So in an interview, let's just switch to interviews.
Yeah.
In an interview, what is the purpose of an interview?
Yeah, just introduce yourself and give what you can offer.
Yeah, so the purpose of an interview is like, are you going to help me with the problem that I've got, right? Or what are you going to do for me? Like, why should I hire you? Basically, this is the purpose of an interview, trying to understand, should I hire this person? But what we see in particular in Europe is that companies don't directly ask that question because sometimes it's seen as a little bit too direct, right? So they won't say, tell me why I should hire you, tell me why you're special. They won't say that. They'll be thinking it, but what they'll ask you is, so why did you apply for the role? Or so why are you interested in this position? And so the candidates, instead of realizing, okay, this is where I need to talk about the value that I bring, because actually that's the whole purpose of this interview, they fall into the trap of talking about all the things they want to get. So you have an interviewer who has a problem that needs a problem solved and is in their mind thinking, why should I hire this person? And then the person starts saying, you should hire me because I want you to invest so much time, energy and effort in me, and I need training and development, and I want you to relocate me, and I want a higher salary, and I want to do something I've never done before, and never once talks about the value that they bring, and then wonders why they don't pass the first interview round.
But I mean, it's also a tricky part because they kind of trap the candidate, and if the candidate doesn't really have this experience or if not knowledge you're mentioning now, they will really think that the target of the question is something else, but in reality, that's quite tricky. So, how would you then say we can impress a recruiter during the interview?
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So I would say, kind of like, first of all, so for me, whenever I do a lot of interview coaching, right, with a lot of my candidates, and there are kind of 3 major areas I cover, and it's also what I just said about the cover letter. So kind of like, why this company, why this job, and in particular, why you? And I think people need to really know what are their selling points, you know? So for me, what impresses me is if I'm speaking to a candidate who has an elevator pitch, okay? So by elevator pitch, I mean, can in 30 seconds say who they are and what they do, and doesn't tell me their life story from beginning to end in the first 1 minute of a conversation with me, right? So really can be direct and to the point and clear on who they are, what they do, what they're studying, you know, what they've done. And then secondly, clearly able to articulate why they feel they'd be a good candidate for this role. Because actually, this is a question that I do ask. So I do directly ask the question when I'm interviewing candidates, why do you think you'd be a good candidate for this role? And so my expectation would be that they can clearly explain why they, you know, what they bring, what they offer. And I think even if there's no experience, if there's a good logical explanation and that is being able to be positioned in the right way, I think that is critical. Because when a recruiter is speaking with you, the question that they're thinking is, you know, how is this person going to be if I put them in front of my best client? You know, how are they going to interview? How are they going to come across? So if you've done a bit of preparation in advance and you know these points, and these points most of the time can be quite generic, right? As I said, have one for R&D, have one for regulatory, have one for quality, have one for the different areas you're applying in, and then just learn it and know it. You know, a lot of this is just preparation and practice.
Okay. So there is no magic trick that can impress any recruiter with.
You know what? There's no magic trick, but you know, it's basic, but just nobody does it. Literally nobody does it. And you know, candidates, if I can give a hint as well, you know, another mistake that I see a lot of people make is that when they're applying for, when they're preparing for an interview, for example, they spend way too much time preparing and learning everything about that company and nothing about themselves. You know, I've had candidates where, you know, they've gone to an interview. Well, they haven't quite gone to the interview, because I've always stopped. I always do a coaching call before the interview, so I see it beforehand. But you know, they'll have learned the whole history of the company, when it was founded, when so and so joined, when that. And then I say, okay, so what are the 3 things that you bring to the table that make you a good candidate for this role? Can't answer that question. Haven't done any preparation on themselves, just learn everything about the company. So it needs to be a good mix of both. You have to know enough about the company that you have 2 or 3 major reasons as to why that company, you know, but you don't need to know that. No one's going to test you on the career, on the founding history of the company. You know, they're just going to say, why do you want to join us? So you need to say, for me, I've got 2 big reasons. One is this and the other one's that. And it needs to make sense. But the other part is, make sure you actually do a bit of prep on who you are, what you bring, and otherwise you've got nothing to add when you go to the interview, you know?
That's true. So you work on yourself so you can present yourself better, instead of spending time trying to figure out what the really founding team did and who came in and who came on.
Yeah.
So, okay. Yeah, I think that's a really great point. So maybe this is some point that people need to consider, to be able to make 3 spotlight, you know, 3 big sentences. Like you can say, boom, boom, this is what I am, what I can bring, and this is why I think I will be a good fit in your company. So that's a quite nice point. So we had also a lot of questions, because, you know, when you are in academia, you have to do network. If you don't network, you will never find a job.
Yeah.
70%, I mean, this is what people, they tell to academia, 70% of the job that people get is because of networking, not because of it's not through direct application. So first of all, we want to know if this is really true. And second of all, how one needs to network, how can you use social medias like LinkedIn to be able to use it properly to network, to increase the chance of finding a job.
Yeah. So networking is absolutely critical, right? I think it's and networking is really where you're able to uncover those type of opportunities that aren't advertised, right? And those are the great ones, because when you network and you find out someone's hiring and it's not published, there's less competition. You know, you have already a foot in the door because there's a relationship. And even though we have globalization and social media and all this kind of stuff, careers and jobs is still all about people in the end, right? And people trust people, and it's all about the relationships that you have. And a lot of the time people will prioritize a relationship over something totally cold because there's that trust, right? So I think networking is absolutely critical, and you can do that very easily by just, you know, going to events in particular. Getting in front of people, I think is great. Speaking at events is even better, because then you have people coming to you, right? And you start to build a bit of a brand. But then we have kind of social media and then LinkedIn, which is an incredible platform to be able to elevate yourself and to reach opportunities that then otherwise you may never have known about because you didn't have the network. But I see a lot of mistakes when people come to using LinkedIn, and a lot of hacks that people could be doing that they're not doing. So I'll be happy to share them with you, Melika. The first one I would say is connect with people, but actually connect with people with purpose. Yeah.
Okay.
So did you know that you can personalize an invitation on LinkedIn?
I know that you can write some text message when you want to connect with someone. You can write, hey, I want to connect you, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, exactly. So I would say, like, you'd be surprised how many people just send just like blank connection requests, with no message attached. So that's the first mistake a lot of people make, because, you know, I personally, if somebody connects with me and they don't put a personalized message, I won't accept it. And if you're trying to connect with CEOs or directors of departments, you know, people that you're trying to strategically link in with, and you're just sending them a totally blank connection request, if they're looking at your profile saying, like, why are you requesting to connect with me? Like, what is the purpose of this? So it's really valuable to actually just add in, hi, first name, you know, I read your profile, I saw this was highly interesting, and I wanted to connect with you and, you know, learn more, right? Don't ask for something in that connection request. The other type of connection request that I reject is, hi, Elena, please connect with me and share my profile to your network so that I can get a new job. No. Reject. So I think it's really important that, like, again, it's this whole thing of, like, don't go out there asking for stuff. Always go out there, like, showing what you can bring and what you offer, right? So connect with someone with purpose, and, you know, do 10 of those a day, right? But strategically, not just as many as you can, but, you know, I want to target CEOs of startup companies in Zurich, right? So then every day just connect with 10 and personalize each invitation request, and then comment on their stuff. So when they're posting stuff, comment, but not with, I'm looking for a job in the comment section, but actually something meaningful. And then what will happen is you'll get up on their radar, right? So you know, if people are commenting or sharing my content, I will look at their profile, see who they are, I'll thank them for it, you know? And so that's how you actually kind of meaningfully connect and engage on LinkedIn. But it needs to be with purpose, not just like blanket message as many people as I can.
Yeah, that's true. It's like, if you don't personalize, if you don't put some effort to make yourself shine, it will just become like something like others, and nobody will pay attention to that. So you mentioned about going to events. What kind of events you meant that people could go?
Yeah, like, definitely, I would say, like, if you can, just any kinds of events within the area that you're targeting within industry, right? So, like, if you are, I mean, so if we talk about kind of within the various different therapeutic areas, there are events that are dedicated to, you know, orthopedics or cardio, you know, then there are kind of, you know, or even kind of aesthetics, you know, there are events dedicated to these areas. But then if you're focusing on a certain kind of vertical, so we do a lot of recruitment in regulatory and quality, for example, there are events, you know, that happen around, you know, for regulatory professionals. And if you can go to these type of events, you will typically network with hiring managers a lot of the time, with recruiters, you know, and it has much more impact when you're in person, right? When you're having a drink with somebody, you know, during a breakout session, or you sit next to somebody, you know, in an event, you're able to really connect with them at a different level. That has much more impact than, you know, just liking people's stuff on LinkedIn. Yeah. So that is something I would recommend if there's anything happening in your area.
That I think that's very important, because it's about people, it's about connection. Like you, as you also said, you find job because you know people and you're able to connect to that. And my next question is somehow relevant to that. You know, I live in Germany, and I know a lot of people with a PhD or postdoc education that they have very limited knowledge of German, or they basically don't know any German. So I imagine that when you go to this kind of meetings also, you are supposed to speak the local language because it makes it much easier. So how much you would chance for someone to find a job with a PhD or postdoc with a limited content, for example, in Germany or in Germany speaking part of Switzerland?
So so what was the first part of your question? Because I lost a little bit of what you said.
My question was that if somebody doesn't know any German,
yeah.
So how would you see that how much is the chance for them to find a job?
So I think it really depends. There's two parts. The first thing is it really depends on the role that they're applying for, right? So, you know, if you're applying for a position where, for example, kind of more working kind of in production, you know, there I can see why the German would be really important, and with a lot of our clients as well, those type of roles that are kind of, you know, more kind of on the operations side within industry typically do require local language because of the type of the people that they would interact with might not speak English. But and I think this is more relevant for your followers, positions in regulatory, positions in medical writing, positions in, you know, scientific affairs, in medical affairs, in development, most of the time German tends to be a nice to have, but not necessarily a must have, right? And there what they look for actually is great level of English, because I mean in regulatory, because you're communicating with, you know, regulators, most of the time the communication is in English. In medical writing, because you're reviewing journals and doing literature searches and having to write, you know, a persuasive piece of scientific writing, and so that's typically done in English. So I don't think it's totally a deal breaker, but I think it's more this idea of being a little bit more horizontal in the types of roles you're applying for, and don't saying only I'm going to apply for this role, but try some stuff in some other departments, because the skills and knowledge you have is still cross transferable. And the second thing is, you know, with COVID, we're seeing a lot of companies being much more flexible with stuff like remote working and, you know, hiring people from different countries and everything being much more collaborative. And so there, I do think that in the future, it's, you know, the local language will become less of an issue, especially in the type of roles that we've just discussed, because there you're going to have companies, you know, in the US hiring somebody in Germany or in France and I don't know where, and working from home. So
that makes a lot of what you say. So I saw a lot of people ask for your LinkedIn profile and your coaching sessions. This is Elena's LinkedIn profile. So this is how you could access her. And it is about the career tips that you provide. This is like workshops or webinars, or could you please comment on that?
This is just some free content that we have on our website, all around kind of job searching and stuff like that. But in terms of finding out a little bit more about kind of, you know, what I do or following a bit of my content, definitely follow me on LinkedIn, because that's where I'm sharing a lot of tips and trends that I'm seeing, and, you know, hints to help people. And then the other thing as well, I just want to make one point, because the kind of stuff, so when a recruiter gets involved, a lot of the time it's normally with experience candidates. So you might find, I don't know if any of your followers have seen that, but they'll be applying for roles directly with recruiters, and recruiters will be saying to them, no, but you need experience for this, right? And let me explain a little bit behind the reason behind, because when a company engages a recruitment company, they're paying that recruitment company to find them a candidate with experience. So a lot of the time, unless it's, and it does happen for us sometimes, that we have roles where the company says, you know, actually, we'll take somebody entry level and train them. A lot of the times, the roles that recruiters will work on are requiring experience. And so people that are coming out, you know, and making their first move to industry won't find much success in that scenario. And I really believe that being proactive and going directly to companies, in particular smaller companies, and promoting yourself, like connecting with CEOs and kind of saying, hey, you know, I love, you know, what your business is doing. You know, I've studied something really similar in the last 5 years, and I'm looking to transition to industry, and I feel like I could bring a lot of value in that particular area of technology or that particular discipline. I really feel like that is going to be a great chance for people to get that first step in the door, and then to use the recruiter kind of a little bit later, you know, once you have that bit of experience. So don't only look for recruitment companies when applying for your new job, but be proactive and target specific companies.
Okay, I think that's so. So when companies engage recruiting companies like your company, kind of outsourcing HR departments, or why the companies look for it?
So when companies will use recruitment companies, it's typically for a couple of things. Either it's difficult to fill positions, so high level skill sets. It's positions that they want to keep confidential, so they go externally and keep that level of confidentiality. Or it's a lot of the time also it can be that it's volume, so they have so many roles that their HR can't handle that, so therefore they outsource it to get high quality candidates fast. So we typically would work collaboratively together with HR departments of big companies, or when we're working with a startup company, for example, they might not even have a HR department.
Yes.
And so we kind of take on that role by bringing them talent, and kind of helping them through that process.
Okay, yeah, that's good to know. So maybe once our company is starting to grow, I will ask for help. Talent, I think we can target them much easier and nicer than what we do, or what I would do. So as I said, in most of the time, I mean, all my followers are in the range. A lot of people who are coming from other countries to Germany, Europe, or generally US, everywhere else, and they have a background from other countries.
Yeah.
So scenarios that I see is that coming to do a PhD in Germany, and they come from their country, they did a master there, and they don't have any industrial experience. Then they come to Germany and they start to do a PhD, and then during the PhD also they don't do anything. So they just focus on the PhD. They just want to do their PhD. Also because in Germany, kind of contract based. So the professor is giving you the contract, and then you have to work. So there's no really time to take a break, and you can go do some industrial work. And then it's 2 or 3 months before they finish their PhD, they want to move to industry, and they don't know what to do. They're like, oh, where should I start, and what should I do? And yeah, it's like I have no experience. What kind of recommendation would you give to these people?
So in this scenario, I would say be realistic to start with. It's probably going to take you longer than 2 months to find something, and start sooner, right? Because, you know, especially in Germany, the recruitment market does move quite slow. So I would say, you know, be realistic in your expectations of how long that's going to take. And I can't stress enough, try to start developing that network from early on, you know. Start developing a network of a company that might take you as an intern, or to do an internship, or to do part of your PhD, you know, somehow incorporated with a company if possible, or to sandwich, you know, to just sandwich a year somewhere. Because the most important thing when you move to industry is experience. And even if it's a couple of months, right, to kind of come out fresh with absolutely nothing, and then to try and say, okay, I'm going to totally transition right now, it becomes harder. Because when a company is looking at you with your PhD but 0 experience, and they're looking at somebody that doesn't have a PhD but maybe has a year and a half, they will go for the person with experience unless the PhD is the deal-breaking factor. So it's critical. But on the other hand, if now, imagine you have these 2 candidates, one with a PhD fresh out of uni, or fresh out of doing their studies, finalising their PhD. You have somebody who has done their masters and a year and a half experience, but then you have somebody with a PhD that has 6 months of practical experience somewhere done kind of whilst they've been studying their PhD. That will be the top candidate, because that is the highly educated candidate, but also with the experience. That makes the difference. So I would say proactively try to sandwich that in, and if not, start doing that networking early on and proactively target companies that would be willing to offer you, even if it's a couple of months after your PhD, a couple of months of experience, because that you will leverage that to get into industry.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, I understand what you say. So you feel that doing a PhD doesn't make someone like overqualified? So because a lot of people are also worried that, yeah, I get the PhD, I'm overqualified, now I don't find a job. But you say that if you have a little bit of experience, it doesn't really make you overqualified. It helps you also to find a job.
So the question is always, what is overqualified, right? And who's saying overqualified, and what does overqualified mean?
Yeah,
because
yeah, just comment on that. Yeah.
No, I was going to say, because a lot of times, right, when companies say you're overqualified, a lot of the times, in my experience, it doesn't necessarily mean they're overqualified. It means you're too expensive, or your salary expectations are too high.
Okay.
And this is also something that we see a lot of, right? So I will speak to candidates that have just finished their PhD, and they'll be asking for really high salary expectations because they've done a PhD. And again, when you go into industry, they pay you based on your experience, right? So if you've done your PhD and you have really high salary expectations, you're basically pricing yourself out of the market in comparison to other candidates. Doesn't mean to say a PhD won't help you earn more money. It definitely will. But in that first role, it won't. In the second or third role, that's where the PhD really makes a difference. I mean, I placed a really good director of regulatory affairs, and it was the only candidate in my shortlist that had the PhD. And in the end, the company paid an extra 30,000 on what they were preparing to pay, because that candidate had a PhD. And that was, the candidate had the experience, the leadership, and the PhD. That was kind of the creme de la creme of profiles. But when you come kind of with no experience and the PhD, I think it's good to just, be realistic in what your expectations should be, so you can get that higher salary, but a little bit later on in your career.
Okay. So that's really good to know that when they say you are overqualified, means that you are expensive,
A lot of the time companies will say overqualified, but what they'll mean is too expensive.
Okay. So do you recommend doing postdoc industries? For example, someone does a PhD but cannot find a job. A lot of time I hear people say, oh, do postdoc in industry. What would you see about that?
Definitely.
Okay.
Yeah, because having the opportunity to get that step into industry and that step closer to industry is what really makes a difference, so it's something I would definitely recommend, because then you're kind of coming out with a much more awareness of what industry is as well, right? And it gives you kind of a springboard to leverage when you then go into that full-time position in industry.
Okay, I was just going through the questions I asked you. Someone asked about these online courses. You can, you study, I don't know, you get a PhD in for example, biomedical engineering, and then you want to find a job in machine or something more different perspective. And people try to go and get courses in Coursera to get certificate, and just to show that we have done something. So how do you see that impact on TV?
Okay, so my advice, is, if you have the choice between doing 6 months of an online course or 6 weeks of an online course, or you have the opportunity to go and work for free in a company for 6 weeks, don't even think about the online course, because it's the same problem, right? Like it's the experience that makes the difference. And so you're already your followers are already highly qualified, highly expert, with high qualifications. A couple more training skills or certificates is not going to be the thing that makes the difference. And I see this in particular a lot in Germany and Switzerland, actually, where candidates, they'll kind of like, they'll finish their studies and then they'll do this training, and then it's like, hey, I've just got this certificate and now I'm looking for a job. And then it's like, okay, but what experience do you have? Like the certificate is the theory, but what do you bring? Like what can you bring to the table? And then it's the same thing. So actually, I would say, proactively target 5-10 companies that are not giant companies, right? So look for small companies where, you know, they don't have these big big budgets, and say to them, look, I'm targeting a position in this type of company, and I'm looking to use the knowledge that I've developed in my academia into industry. Would you be interested to have me for 3 months do a practical type of internship or practical type of working experience, minimal cost, you know, take the hit, instead of paying for a training, work for free for 2 months and get the experience. That is what you'll take into that next role, and that is so much more valuable than doing all these training courses and getting all these certificates, because it's the ongoing circle of never having the experience that will get you into that role. And then you get, you know, you spend more and more money doing all these trainings, and still you don't have the experience. So I would really say, you know, and I promise you, nobody does it. Be proactive, target those companies. You can do it very easily on LinkedIn. Just type by location, type by industry, filter by company size, and just look at the list of companies. And then you look, who are the CEOs of those companies, link in with them, and then connect with them, interact with a few of their posts, and then, you know, tell them what you're targeting. And listen, if I had an intern come and say, hey, you know, I'm really interested in doing what you're doing at Elemed, and, you know, can I work for you for free for a couple of months? I think it would be really rare, you know, that if you target 10, I think it'll be rare if all 10 say absolutely no chance.
Okay, and that's interesting, because I always thought that the companies, especially small companies, they have a limited number of employees, and they don't want to spend time teaching someone else, you know, because once you take an intern, somebody needs an intern, you know, it will be,
yeah, but
and you start working.
Yeah, absolutely. But position it as, you know, could I shadow someone or not? Remember, talk about kind of the value that you bring, and not what you want to get. So not like, can I come and do an internship so someone can train me and I get all this knowledge? But, you know, I've got 5 years working in this field in academia. I really understand the technology because it's the area that I've focused on. And, you know, I'm targeting on the long term this and this, you know, would you be open if I were to come and shadow and help out and spread the workload of, you know, your regulatory manager for a couple of months? Would that be something that you would be, you know, open to doing? Would that be of value? You know, would that help spread the workload? You know, in small companies, people tend to be very pressured with a lot of work. So if you go in with that angle and proactively reach out, I think you'll have some success.
Okay, I think that's quite a nice tip. I think a lot of people could join that, because 6 weeks, or I don't know, 2 or 3 months of free work doesn't hurt anybody. What if it helps create this big jump and help to expand? It's quite important. So we have around 1 minute. I really appreciate that you joined here. I always told my followers previously that you have a lot of experience. You do this coaching session, you try to proactively give back to the community, to help, support, to not for women empowerment, but also for, you know, women that want to, you know, everybody. So you do your job right, your chance among everybody else. So I want to give you this 1 minute and just tell what you feel and what you want to do, and just feel it as you wish.
Yeah, I mean, it's been really nice chatting with you, and I've been kind of watching some of the comments coming through, and thanks everyone for the love hearts and the thumbs up. So I'm glad that you got value from this. Definitely check out our website and follow me on LinkedIn, and, you know, and hopefully that will also give you value. But equally, if you have further questions, I'm happy to jump on another one of these and do just the live Q&A or something like that, Melika. You know, I'm happy to help your followers. But I really hope that, you know, you all got, that's our LinkedIn page. Follow that as well, because we have loads of cool blogs and stuff all around, you know, careers in particular in medtech.